I'll go ahead and start the session here. I'd like to welcome everybody to our 2024 Masters Conference. Thanks for attending. This is the second Masters-specific conference that US Rowing has hosted. The first was in 2022. We're making a concerted effort to provide value to our Masters athletes and members. And next week in Chula Vista, California, we're having our first Masters focused camp. And we're also having a coaches ride along for Masters coaches to give them an in-depth training experience working with athletes, with expert coaches to help push them and their knowledge base forward. So if you have ideas on ways that US Rowing can meet Masters members' needs, please reach out to me or Chris Chase. We're always looking for new ideas and ways that we can build value for members. I'd like to thank our sponsors of the conference, Coffee Corporation, Felipe Boats, and Crew Lab. And perfect transition. We're here today with the founder of Crew Lab, Simon Hoadley, who's been a rowing coach for a quarter century, originally from New Zealand, lived in Australia, also in Los Angeles. Be interested to get your view on the comparison of lifestyles in the various places you've lived. But I will turn it over to you and welcome everybody.
Oh, thanks. Well, I think we were talking about this yesterday. Los Angeles would be a paradise if everyone was on bicycles. But yeah, it was a beautiful day today to be on a bike, but a lot of cars. Yeah, but I guess, yeah, thank you, Chris. And I guess good morning, good afternoon. We've got different time zones. I'm obviously in Los Angeles, so it's 9:30, but welcome. Yeah, I guess jumping ahead. So yeah, I think you've done a good introduction there. The reason for this is, I guess, is talking about training plans for Masters athletes. I've been a coach for a long time, and I guess sort of the genesis of a lot of the stuff that's in this presentation is I guess my journey through COVID. Started COVID in lockdown. Probably the fitness and the health wasn't quite where I needed it to be. So I thought, right, this is a good opportunity to see if I can actually do some research into the training that I need to be doing. I'm mid-40s and have 3 kids, so I'm time poor. I'm running between soccer and rugby and basketball and all the different sports. So I put together this online group, and I guess the other side of that was I was building this company, Crew Lab, which I founded with some of the rowers at UCLA who I was coaching, and really so the two things sort of I guess were born at the same time. So there's a lot of overlap. So if I mentioned Crew Lab or Lab Cats, those are the two things. So Lab Cats was the experimental group. We originally called them the Lab Rats, and we did this 12-week study where I was bringing across some of the research that was happening in other sports to see how effective it would be for myself and I guess Masters athletes. We had a sort of a second goal of can we create a social online community and what kind of impact would that have? And you can see there on the slide, the results were really stunning. We saw 18% improvements in race pace gains over 12 weeks. So at the end of the study, we said, so great, thanks very much everyone for participating. Yeah, we're all moving on. And they went, no, this is great. This is perfect. We love it. We want to stay. So we promoted everyone to Lab Cats. And I think 3 years later, maybe more, I've lost track, but we're still going. We've probably got maybe still 70% of the core Lab Rats are still doing stuff, and there's more people coming on board all the time. I think 2 or 3 of the other presenters are in the group, so there's you get some people getting involved, which is really cool. But yeah, a lot of the research that I'm going to share has come out of this Lab Cats group. Disclaimer, I'm not a scientist, definitely a practitioner, more of an engineer, if you like, take some of the good ideas and try to put it into practice. I think most coaches sort of fall into that category. I do read a lot of research though. It's, when people ask me what books I'm reading, it's generally research articles, which is a little bit boring, but true. yeah, I think yeah, I'll share some of the cool things that we've built in the software for Crew Lab, which have supported the stuff that we've done in the lab cats. Yeah, so jumping ahead. So a quick poll. Is this why you are here? Given my age, and this is, I guess, a question I get a lot. And so I've ended up sort of writing it down, and this is in my notes. Given my age, my time constraints, and my training goals, what is the optimum mix of boat training versus other types of training and the different training intensities for each part of the year? So, Chris, you got that poll there? We'll find out from the crowd if this is spot on. Do I have to do something? You're on mute, Chris.
I've opened the poll. We've
Oh,
got
great. Okay.
4 responses, and so far it's all yes, spot on. Let's get into it.
Okay, great. Well, yeah. Yeah, I think that's great. It's a trick question, and I don't know if that's a George Pocock quote, but I thought that was funny, so I left it there. I guess really I get this question a lot, and I think it's sort of more the tip of the pyramid in terms of what we should be doing. The short answer, or the easiest answer is, and a lot of people do this, is go and recruit a better team if you want to have success and win at Masters Nationals. I kind of think that's the wrong answer, and I'll cover that later off in the presentation as well. And we're definitely going to talk about the physical plan, so you don't have to jump to another presentation unless you want to. But really, the key thing for me is you've got to solve the social, emotional, and the mental aspects to get you to your goals. And I think that if you think about the successful crews, they tend to sort of fall into sort of maybe 2 buckets. There's the grumpy solo single sculler who's out there, winning all the head of the child's races and doing that, or you have a group of strongly bonded and aligned social group that can survive over a long period of time. And I guess my analogy here is sort of like the Rolling Stones. They just keep trucking along. They can bounce through the usual setbacks that I guess derail teams and stop training. And generally that's the weakness that I see. And I guess I should mention this as well. Is in my job, I literally just go around the world really talking to coaches. And any given week, I probably talk to 25, 30, maybe more rowing coaches. That'd probably be a slow week, I'll be honest. So I get to get a lot of insight into what different teams are doing. It's been really cool. So we've got plenty of really good coaches that have joined LabCats at different stages and offered their advice. Yeah, it's pretty cool. So I get to see what's going on out there. But yeah, definitely, I think start at the base of the pyramid is my real advice. So the real question shouldn't be about all the training types and the intensities and all the rest of it. It's really, have I got the mental skills to hang in there and the social and emotional environment to go the whole way. Yeah. Yeah, we've talked about that a little bit. I think building that culture and that community is really important. I was listening to a little bit of the keynote speakers, and they were talking about the same stuff. I think building those social connections and getting into the club events and really trying to build a community. I'll use the Lab Cats as an example of how an online community can really be useful alongside a local community. But honestly, the local community I think is the key. So start to grow the group of people that can help you win Masters Nationals or whatever the key group key campaign is that you want to do. Yeah, I think in terms of a couple of really good questions, is basically, and this is for anyone, really, not Masters or whatever, but basically the 2 quick questions you should be sort of thinking about and asking if your team is, are you good to go today? And are you coming tomorrow? Because when you start to get wavering, maybe and maybe, that's when your plans are starting to get derailed. The other thing that moving into the mental aspect is the idea that a lot of this chasing wins at Masters Nationals or winning head of the Charles, they're very much extrinsic motivators. So I really like the stuff that Daniel Pink put in his book Drive. Autonomy, mastery, purpose. I think you're using all those things to really build that leans into the social community and bring some of the emotional stuff in there. So yeah, I think intrinsic motivation is really key. So I think the first thing is think a bit longer term. Think past the head of the Charles. Set it up so that the week after the head of the Charles, the training is the same as the week before. I think turn the turn the campaigns into milestones rather than destinations. Make it so that they fuel you, and they definitely add to the idea of being able to do things, but they're not the end. And you don't overcommit to the campaign, so you got to take 2 weeks off. And I guess really common is that a lot of people get to the end of the Head of the Charles, or use that one as the example, and then afterwards they've got to refine their work-life balance, or they've got to get through the aches and pains that they've been carrying for an amount of time. And I think that's where you got to lean into the intrinsic motivations and work out how you can get the yes to the answers to are you coming to the question, are you coming tomorrow? Which really leads to the main thing, building back to the physical plan. And I guess from here on, Chris, if people want to jump in with questions, I'm sort of happy to sort of turn this into a bit of a more of a meandering presentation. I'm definitely going to talk now for the next sort of half an hour about the physical plan and what we learned from the lab cats. But I did really want to put out there that without the other things and the rest of this stuff is kind of useless. And it'll work in the short term, but you want to have a long-term thing, because the number one predictor for success is literally a history of training. So your consistency and your durability are the two key features that you should be trying to work on and improve. In terms of, when I say the physical plan, that's your rigging, that's your training, that's you actually doing physical activities. I think have the idea that you training for the Head of the Charles or San Diego Crew Classic has a great short-term effect, but you're actually looking to accumulate those over a long period of time, and so really get patient. I think that's really the key thing is stay patient. In terms of durability, I think it's important to note that I think one of the biggest challenges for masters athletes is that aging impact, and you are different from day to day, and you're certainly different from when you were 20, and you're different from the 50-year-olds and the 30-year-olds in your squad. I think if you've ever done a long erg and you've tracked your heart rate, you'll notice how the cardiac drift goes up. Your fitness has changed over the course of a 1 hour erg. So your ability to do something at the end is different at the start. Your likelihood to be injured goes up and down at different time periods. One of the other sports I coach is rugby, and if you see someone getting tired, you got to pull them off the field, basically, because your chance of getting a head injury triples once your fitness declines to whatever it is, 50%, whatever the numbers are. But start to pull tired people off is a really good way of protecting against concussions. And obviously building your fitness, your cardiovascular fitness is a great way to protect against concussions. But sidetracked on to rugby now. I think you have the idea that the aging is something that hits us all, and I think you got to really build up a really good strong plan that gets you through it. You're talking about this, I guess the number one drug that anti-aging clinics should sell is really the idea that you should be doing exercise. The challenge obviously is as you're getting older, I guess exercise just becomes a little bit harder, and I think largely this is tied up to your ego, or all people's ego. Your recovery from a training session goes down, and it goes down on a year-by-year basis. Every year your recovery is worse than the year before once you go past about the age of 40. Your adaptation from those training sessions is down as well, and this happens inside a session if you're doing multiple repeats of intervals. And obviously, I think this is the big one, your chances of injuries goes up. I think talking to masters rowers or even just any masters athletes, I like to joke that basically your injuries I feel like it's like a pinball, just moves around my body. I've got an IT band issue at the moment. It'll be plantar fasciitis in a month. I'll have a sore shoulder later on. I think this is where the idea of the durability really sort of comes in. I think it's a real challenge, I guess, the injury side of it. I think Tessa had a really nice presentation a minute ago, and talked a little bit about being not being a buttercup. I think I'll get to that on the next slide, but I think there is an element of try to work out how you can continue to train and stay consistent while you navigate your injuries, and have the idea that the injuries probably aren't going away anytime soon. We see a lot of people gravitate towards masters rowing because of the low impact nature of the sport. Their knees are gone from 30 years of running, or the plantar fasciitis just won't go away, or whatever. So I think cycling and rowing are really excellent exercises for the masters athletes out there. Low impact. probably rowing is probably better than cycling in many ways, and it's a full body and there's a large element of power. Yeah, so just talking about some of the research here. So in doing the research for LabCats, one of the things that I found was that your capacities decline by 1 to 1.5% per year. And you've probably all seen the graphs where, the impact of aging. That's think about it as being your capacity. And obviously we know that to get the last elements of your capacity involves a lot of training. It's, it's the 80-20 rule. It's just harder to get there. So I have the idea that your maximum limit is coming down by 1 to 1.5% per year for someone who trains. Given the impact on recovery and adaptation, it's harder to get back there. So a really good strategy for masters rowers is just don't stop and then try to beat people on the long game. Win in 5 years and just assume that everyone else is going to stop training and go backwards faster than you if you can keep training. 10 to 15% per decade. I think that's a crazy high number. When you get to, I'm not sure, I think it's 70, 75, 80, somewhere there, it obviously accelerates again. The other key element here is that probably more impacted, I think your endurance masters athletes tend to find that that's easier to maintain. I think, they're probably why they drift more towards marathon events. Every time I do a marathon, I'm sort of average age. If I do sprint events, I'm not. And what happens is your power, your speed, and your balance are much more impacted in terms of the losses. So you should be really focused on trying to maintain those as much as you possibly can, because the capacity will decrease really quickly and at a higher rate than the endurance, which doesn't. I think your body just stops making nerves and it's just challenging. But the best thing you can do here is obviously if you want to be a fast 70-year-old is be doing training when you're 50 and a real background in the endurance training is key. And really this would be fine if we weren't all tied up in the idea that we have these memories of the ergs we did when we were 22, or when the speed we could run when we were 30 or whatever it is. And I think the ego is really the hard one. I think you got to build this idea in. And this is the other thing as well, is every year you do a 2K and you're slower, you can kind of assume that the training hasn't worked, which is incorrect. If you have the idea that for a 2K erg, you should, if you train the exact same amount as effectively and efficiently as you did the year before, you should be losing 3 to 5 seconds a year. So it's quite a decline, and maybe that's not quite right in terms of the 3 to 5 seconds, but it's do the percentages. What do we get? 300 watts, lose 3 watts. It probably takes you down a couple of seconds. And then having the idea that just staying the same is actually a win. And if you do have the ability to make some changes, then you've done a really good job. So you keep at it and make peace with it. A bit of a top tip here is that if you were a college or a youth rower, change to watts. I think I don't know why people use splits, because every time I look at splits, I think back to when I was 22 and at peak fitness, and you could hold on to 140s for an hour or whatever the crazy numbers were, and I have memories of those numbers that are very firmly attached to splits. So the other thing we did with LabCats is we just moved to watts, where no one understood what was going on, and I guess it was very refreshing and sort of liberating. And I have a different relationship with watts than I do with splits. So I never use splits anymore, and I would never recommend it to anyone. I think I'm not going to talk about this a lot. I know that there's other presenters and there's lots of resources out there, but this is really critical, in terms of your durability and being able to be consistent with your training. You've got to put some thought and effort into all these elements. I strongly believe that it's not overtraining, it's under recovering. And as a masters athlete, your recovery is so diminished that you've really got to be focused on this. You can't survive on those 4-hour nights. There was a guy, Lane Norton that I follow on social media, and he was referencing his journey back and his back injuries he's got, and a really interesting links to a bunch of research that he did. And basically a key element of it was your mental state is a key part of it. So I think having the concept of you want to try to be anti-fragile, try to work your way through injuries and be, I guess, have a positive mindset and that you can do something. I like to think of the idea of when I have my IT band issue, that I've got to be spending more time on my core and more time on my flexibility, and I've got to be drinking more water and going to and eating better foods and looking after myself a bit better. I see those as as I guess like guide rails that bring me back to where I need to get to. So I think they're actually good for forming good habits. Yeah, I truly try to make it so that they're not excuses to take a break, but like everyone, at some stage it happens. And then I'm going to try and click this link. This should be available. Yep, it opens. So we made a warm-up document a while ago for one of the local regattas. There's some ideas in there. At the end of this, you can have a look at that. How do you get back to PowerPoint? There we go. And there's a book in there. I think, have a read of that. I think, the concept of anti-fragile I really like. Just talking about that quickly, you've got the concept of fragile. If you hit something, it breaks. You've got the idea of robust, which is maybe like a cardboard box from Amazon. Can take a few puddles and a few kicks, but at some stage it's getting weaker and then it also breaks, I guess. And then the idea of being anti-fragile is that the more fuel you throw on the fire, the bigger the fire gets. So try to get that kind of a mindset where you're really leaning into the idea that you can train through the injury if you're smart and you're clever, and encourage your teammates and help them out as well. But obviously, listen to your body, and obviously pain is an issue, so work your way through it. Yeah. What do we got? Okay, so jumping into, I guess the next sort of big step is understanding the energy systems and creating a training plan that I think works for masters. So hopefully I've set up some key concepts here. Stay consistent, work on being able to turn up every single day, and that your volume stuff is probably not as critical as you think. So with the Lab Cats, we've really divided up, and the idea for the volume is pretty simple. You try to get through 10 hours a week of really cruisy stuff that's definitely not going to get you injured. So go, grab an indoor bike trainer, or cruise on the erg, or go for a walk, whatever it is. Doesn't really matter, but have the idea that you're trying to get through 10 hours of endurance work, and that's your volume part over here on the. Can you see my mouse? Hopefully you can see my mouse. But yeah, when you get over here, we sort of divide it into two: volume and intensity. And your zone 1 training, and we'll talk about the different zones, is where you want to be getting your volume, your 10 hours. I guess talking about this graph, pretty common lactate curve. The way I like to divide training up very simply is into the 3 zones. 5 zones are a bit more common, where zone 1 gets split twice, and zone 3 can be split twice or more. I think whatever you do, you've got 2 key markers that really define what's happening here. This is generally done off lactate and biological markers like that. Lactate 2, this one you can use tons of stuff. Velocity of VO2 max, FTP, your 2K, your 6K. You can do a whole bunch of stuff. Really, it's just a marker. It's harder to lock down. Maybe lactate 4.0 if you like the sports science stuff. Doesn't really matter, I don't think. One of the parts of the Lab Cats experiment was we really tried to lean into using some of the concepts that are being used in other sports. And I strongly believe that we're a long way behind in terms of intensity training. I think rowing does a fantastic job on the endurance stuff. We're awesome at doing that. And there's tons of great knowledge. I think the fact that we still send teams out there to do 8x500s, and then the crew says, what's the intensity, coach? And the coach says, as hard as you can. Okay, great. Okay, cool. What are we doing on Saturday, coach? We're going to do 4x1K. Okay, what's the intensity, coach? As hard as you can. So it's not nuanced enough. If you went to cycling and they just said you're going to do 4-minute repeats up a hill as hard as you can, they'd be like, well, what about when are we going to spend some time at 320 watts? They're good at the stuff. I think a lot of a shortcut, I guess an outdated solution is people use rate to do it. But I've done lactate test. I mean, we had a session last week in Lab Cats where it was rate 26, and I can guarantee that that is absolutely it's max. I've seen people do 2K PRs at rate 26. So if you're allocating rates and using that to try to control intensity, it's outdated. If you have if you have 8 different people in a boat, and some of those people would be doing their 1Ks and their 2Ks at rate 28, and some of them are doing it at 38, and you're asking everyone to do 32, I mean, it's just a lottery in terms of what their intensity is. So I really like the idea of us not using rate. I think it's a nice thing to use if you're low on technology, but there are way better solutions. I'll jump through my slides a little bit. So I think if you're tracking your training, and I think everyone should, in terms of, this is the handwritten one, sorry. So in terms of usefulness, heart rate is probably at low effort the gold standard. your RPE, rate of perceived exertion, is just as good as pace, I think, at this stage. So you can be using RPE. RPE tails off a little bit when you get to those max efforts, but heart rate's literally useless. If you're doing 30 seconds on, something off, the delay in your heart rate catching up to your pieces suggests that it's like an endurance session, so you get terrible readings. So the harder the piece now becomes more about pace, and again, I like watts, but obviously if you go on the water, you can use split and those sorts of things. So yeah, I think heart rate is the key thing for measuring for your zone 1 or your volume, and then try to use pace for your intensity stuff, and always measure RPE because it's free. The question that I ask is, how much of yourself have you given? And as long as I keep using those exact same words, the athletes start to calibrate around it. Yeah, so jumping back into here, I guess, yeah, so building 2 markers. This is the one where we track zone 1. This is where we're tracking heart rate, just trying to do 10 hours a week. And yeah, I got an article that I put into the Crew Lab website that I won't look at now, but the link's in there. And yeah, and then for your intensity stuff, if I've got any advice for today, is that start to become really accurate in what you're doing and start to calibrate your intensities. If you start asking it yourself at the end of every 8x500s, how much of yourself did you give, and even just poll the team, you're going to get 7s and 8s and 9s and some 10s, and then you can start to work out, okay, this person says 10 when I'm saying 8, but it doesn't really matter, so yeah, you start to get smarter at it. I think that's a really, really key step, is to start really bringing RPE into the conversation. The other thing for intensity that we got our lab cats, and this leads back to the idea that your recovery is really it's bad. It's less than it used to be. Is the idea of reps in reserve if you've done anything in the lifting community. So I really like the idea that we should be doing intervals with the concept of reps in reserve rather than to failure. I think we talked about the idea that in masters athletes, the power and the speed and those things are really they're declining faster, and I think we want to be really careful when we get in there, and those are the places where you get more injured. So not doing things to failure and not doing things to max press, I think is really good advice. So a lot of the lab cat stuff that we did was we actually started to really control the intensities. And again, watts is again better for split. It's just more accurate on the concept 2 erg. There's a little trick, is that your split is like a rolling average of your last 5 strokes, whereas watts is what you did on the last stroke. And someone checked that with concept 2. That just feels right. So from what I've seen and picked up, but like there's a delay there. I think if you start using watts, you become more accurate and you get a sense of it. And then obviously if you turn the screen down and you ask a rower, I want you to hold 300 watts for 10 strokes, they actually get really good at it. If you ask them to hold 145 split, they're all over the show, because they've never really learned what that feels like. And then once they zone in on 300 watts, you can say, how does 300 watts feel? Okay, it's an RPE of about 8. Okay, great. Let's go on the water. I want you to do 300 watts, roughly RPE 8, and then you can start to get really good at the on-water stuff. Yeah. Okay. How to track your training. Load management. One of the things that we did with Crew Lab is that we actually built a free training management tool. So that made it really easy for us. We track it all. We have the fitness and fatigue graphs and charts and dashboards that you see in Training Peaks and Garmin and Polar. And I do want to talk about the limitations of the heart rate straps with I guess I already did with the high intensity. It's worth knowing that when you're the Polar and the Garmin models of fatigue are based on purely your cardiovascular fatigue, and there are multiple types of fatigue. If I don't sleep, I'm tired. My perception of fatigue, if I'm scared of a 2K, then the load is actually higher. That mental stress. So at Crew Lab, we're going to talk about the idea that cardiovascular is one component of it, great, and that's your heart rate, that's great. But there's also the musculoskeletal loading, and that leads into this whole idea of being injured. So the load management system that we've got actually takes into account that a little bit. And then the other one is the mental load, your stress. So we want to bring in some of that as well. So we're starting to track mood and sleep, and obviously RPE is an element of that as well. So that's why you get the differences in in a session from different athletes. I thought this is 7, and someone else thinks it's a 9. So I think heart rate it's great for the lower intensity stuff for the volume, but it doesn't do a good job. And some of the systems, if you're doing like weights, they just put it down to 0. They're basically saying that there's no load on your body, which is obviously crazy. So I think understanding the limitations of that, and obviously they're trying to sell hard Polar and Garmin. They're pretty keen on you buying another $700 Fenix or whatever they are to track it. You don't need to do it. You can use RPE. All the science suggests that it's just as good. The load management system that we use in the lab cats is a derivative of RPE that I've been developing over a long time now. But yeah, it's been cool. And we've reached out to people in the AIS and international rowers and athletes and coaches who've used these systems. And we're really trying to make it cutting edge in that regard and beyond heart rate. And I think that's key. And for masters athletes, I would suggest that an RPE one is significantly better than a heart rate based one, because the endurance training is probably less problematic for you than the intensity stuff. Yeah, and I think that's what you're trying to do. I think as a masters athlete, you want to make your whole training plan based around power and speed is the key focus. I think I'm saying that multiple different ways. Hopefully it's getting in there. And you're just trying to keep on moving. Avoid the inactivity after head of the Charles that slows you down. Talked about that. Oh, okay. Yeah, so this is the Crew Lab load management, what it looks like. This is me for the last, I don't know, year and a little bit, 400 days maybe. So you can see that when I started, I wasn't as fit as I am now. The yellow line is my fitness, and the blue line is my fatigue. So this was when I did a 10-hour bike race. So that obviously put me into the danger zone in terms of my readiness. The danger zone is where you have to go. You have to visit it. It's kind of like climbing Everest is the way I describe it. You have to go up to the top. You have to go through the no oxygen zone, but you can't live there. So you got to come back out. So green is kind of like your base camp, and red is you acclimatizing to harder loads. Actually doing a rowing training camp rather than talking about camps up Everest. But have the idea you want to spend as much time as you can in this productive training zone, and then do some odd adventures into the red zone when things are good. When your body's healthy, dip in there. You can see the 2 time periods where I got sick and busy. This was COVID in January and a bit of a longer decay in my fitness through here. Chris, can you confirm you can see my mouse? Thumbs up. You can see my mouse if I move it around?
I can see your mouse. Rebecca put in the Q&A that she could not.
Okay, well, I guess, how do we get there? About where it says December 13th, 2023. Yeah, it's probably not easy to see, but I'm hoping I'm moving this around. You can see it. So in here is where I got sick and my training declined and it wasn't so good. And I got to the stage where I'm in the blue down the bottom and the bottom left, team readiness. So that was where I was losing fitness. And then obviously I've tried to climb back in there, and now I'm in a pretty good spot in terms of my training. Yeah. What else we got? We've got a pace calculator, and I'll link out to this. So see if this works. So this is on our website. It's free. I think this is kind of useful as well in terms of, I'm going to do the 2K time that I hope I can do. 140, 350 watts. My max heart rate, I know from just tracking it with max efforts, is 173. So you got the traditional, T5 stuff that came out of the AIS with Tony Rice. I think they did a really good job. I'm not sure for some exactly, but they did a really good job of making a unifying thing down there, which I like. T2 or U2 or any other. This is the standard sort of endurance zones. I think the key thing for your endurance is that you want to be under lactate 2.0. And there was a doctor up in Westerville, Matt Chase. He did some really interesting work in terms of applying this with school kids, and the 1.5 lactate, 1.0. That's a really good range. You're probably getting more gains than by bumping up against 2.0. So when I'm doing it, I use 121 as my heart rate, and then I just basically hold 121 heart rate as long as I can, and then get off. And obviously it starts at maybe 180 watts, and then drifts down to 165 watts by the time I'm finished my 20 minutes or my half an hour. But I'm confident when I get off that I've done a good amount of time building up my endurance, and then I do bike riding as the other one. I try to get through as many commutes as I can with my kids, with the idea that my heart rate's over 100 and in this zone, and that's working for me. I guess I'm not that fussed about doing endurance training. I'm not out there doing hour powers or whatever it is. I kind of just let life take hold. But yeah, this is a really good way of getting some of those lower zones and working out where your watts needs to be. If you don't have access to a lactate test, there's no one down the bottom. You can see how fast you're going. So based on some of these things, you could get a prediction on some of your boats. I think, the original question here was how to win at Masters Nationals. This gives you a sense of how fast you are going, and you can compare it to other results. That was really the reason for putting this together. For the 1K, I think a pretty standard, sort of rough way of doing it is if you divide it in half and take off 10 seconds. So yeah, it puts me in a quad, it's the Cox quad, in a Cox's quad. That puts me maybe 310, maybe not quite that skillful at the moment, maybe 315 for a quad. If you found a bunch of people that were doing 640 and were weighing 99 kgs, so you can do a crew averages here and have some playing around with that. I think it's pretty useful. It's a nice little thing. We'll get back to here. Yeah, some practical tips. And then I really would love to lean into the idea of having a good open discussion. But hopefully this has been covered enough. Stay consistent. Stay consistent. Do something every day. I think that's really critical. I guess the idea of the lab cats is that you can, and I'll talk about the different iterations. I guess here is as you're trying to get the intensity stuff going on. That we did some cycles where we did less training to see if we still had impact. Really, and I guess this is more for the 40s and 50s, if there's older master athletes here. So 3 intensity sessions that are accurate and not to failure and done cleverly. I think you can do 3 a week and then start to manage the recovery. And that was really good. And you're making gains, those 18% in 12 weeks. If you do 2 sessions a week, you make some gains, but it's not a lot. And it depends on where you start in your base fitness. If you're well-trained, then you're breaking even. If you're starting from 0, you're going up. If you're relatively well-trained and you go to 1 intensity session a week, we were seeing that you were losing fitness. Your 1K was getting slower, your 2K was getting slower. So yeah, really interesting in terms of trying to find the minimal optimal volume, which is, I guess, another key part of what we were trying to do. What's the least amount of time that I could put in as a dad, as a rower, and still be making gains, And so we got it down to 90 minutes a week. And I was doing 90 minutes a week, personally, and I made those 18% gains by basically not even doing endurance work and really focusing on the power and the speed and using all the research that's out there. I think I've mentioned this a couple of times, but our sports, I think, behind other sports, I think there's really interesting research out there. We ended up using some I guess some versions of FTP and critical power, and we invented our own testing regime, and we made it easier and easier. So yeah, we did that. I actually did take the research and I did apply it to a junior program as well. Again, not a scientist, just a practitioner. Did apply it to a junior team, and they were at the stage where they could do the intensity sessions every day. Their recovery was just through the roof compared to what the masters were able to hold, and their results were fantastic. So they can do the hard stuff every day. I guess do not train like a 20-year-old. Get durable. I think that's really the key. Build some sort of a system so that you're on top of your body. I've got 5 exercises that I like to do. Cat cow and a few other things that I know that really target the areas of the injuries that I keep seeing. And again, I know what those injuries are because I've got a really detailed training journal. After every single session, I'm writing stuff down. This is the CrewLab app, if I haven't mentioned that. But yeah, I'm writing it all down. I'm tracking the RPE. I'm taking photos of the erg. I'm really making it so that it's really easy to me to refer back and know that every year I get sick in February with some sort of a flu. It's the right IT band, and they're about 6 months apart, and they generally happen when I stop doing the warm-ups because I'm feeling a bit confident. And then some other bits and pieces in there that I'm noticing the injuries that come up repeatedly. And then track your training load. I think have the idea that if you're trying to be consistent and you're trying to be durable, you want to stay out of that danger zone. You want to be at the stage where your training volumes are going up by a set amount each week, and you're not overdoing it. Or if you are overdoing it, you know that you are, and then you lean into the recovery. With the idea that it's harder to overtrain than it is to under recover. So cool, I'm gonna really, I've got to do that. I'll do that 12-hour bike ride, or it was 10-hour bike ride. Okay, I got to really look after myself for the 2 or 3 days leading in, and then the 2 or 3 days after that, I'm not biking to work or with the kids. I'll let someone else do that. Yeah, get really smart with the intensity sessions. I think if there's a major weakness out there, it's that we just do everything to failure, or we use rate. I think if there's no other practical tip here, stop doing that and start to get smart about how you do your intensity sessions. And really got the idea that you'd want to make it so that you can come back in 2 days and do another one and not be injured and not be burned out and not be scared of the idea that, oh my gosh, more 500s to failure, this is going to be a disaster. So yeah, get really smart with your intensity sessions with the idea that they're critical. They're absolutely critical. Going back to the beginning, build that social environment. Make whether it's locally, think long term. Start to look after the relationships that are down there. Go to the club functions. I think lean away from the idea that you want to join those mercenary crews that turn up to regattas and do the campaigns. I think you can still do those if you want, but have the idea of trying to set something up locally as well, and then maybe even join some online stuff. So. Yeah, I was really impressed and a little bit surprised, I'll be honest, with the success of the Lab Cats, the social community that we got out of that. I've made some really good friends out of it, and we're literally spread out across the world, and we occasionally meet up at regattas, and it's just been really, really powerful and really motivating. I think so. Create some sort of a social environment. There's lots of the online teams, and they do the once a month challenges. What do they call it? The Concept 2 cross team challenge is one that's been around forever. There's the one that comes out of Philadelphia there. They do the Premier League run. They do some stuff. There's lots of cool stuff that you can get around. I think, have a look into that space. And then I guess the final one is start to fuel your intrinsic motivation. Devalue the Masters win or the whatever it is, and have the idea that you're really just out here trying to fight aging and being healthy, and then the wins will come. If your plan is to try to win Heat of the Childs this year, you're too late, because the team that's going to beat you, going back to the slide right at the beginning, the number one predictor for success is the history of training. So have the idea that there's not much you can do in the next 6 months. But if you have an 18-month plan or a 3-year plan, then yeah, go for it. Game on. And obviously try to bring along some people with you when we get to. And then a couple of books I referenced. You'll notice that they're not the physical stuff. They're more around the mental stuff. I think the ability to turn up tomorrow is more of a mental thing than a physical thing. Yeah, I think that's all I got. Yeah, thanks to the sponsors. Woo. Are there any questions, Chris?
We've got a couple questions that have popped up in the last couple minutes.
Cool.
So Gavin asked, does using power when rowing on the water improve training effectiveness, i.e. like NK and power or luck?
Yeah, so complicated. I've really leaned into the idea that I've gone away from hardware as much as I possibly could. I think the Concept 2 Erg is a good calibrating tool, and it's pretty easy to get, but really lowering the barriers to people being able to participate and use good information. I really like those devices. I also really like the idea that I want people to enjoy rowing. So, I'm really committed to the idea that you want technology-less rowing. I've changed that, screenless rowing. You can still use technology, but get out there and feel the boat. Most Masters crews that I row in, if there's 4 of us in the boat, there's 5 or 6 speed coaches, if you count all the watches, and everyone's got an NK speed coach. And I think we all start watching that, as opposed to, we get out in the ocean, we get the dolphins and the seals and the rest of it. Like, just out there and just enjoy it. Build that social environment. And start thinking and feeling it, and then use the RP at the end of it. I have a Garmin watch, so it still pulls all the data in, and I look at it later. But I think don't be too reliant on it, and have the idea that if I was out there yesterday and we were doing 1 minute on, 1 minute off, and then we talked about the goal of being race pace, and for our quad it's like 145 to 150, which I know for me is I know how that feels on an erg, sort of 300 watts. So I'm like, okay, cool. I've got to be able to get to the zone where I think I'm putting that amount of effort in, with the idea that I'm not trying to go to failure on these pieces. I want to be able to do 12, and then reps in reserve, I can do 2 or 3 more, or we can go in. It's fine. Rather than like, I can't do 1 more and then I can't turn up tomorrow. So I'm a little bit stiff and sore today, but I can go again tomorrow, and we're get out there and do some more hard training sessions, because I didn't go to failure. yeah, I think that's my sort of take on those ones. And obviously that saves you a lot of setup time too, because it's much nicer to take the boat and just go for a row rather than spend an hour trying to calibrate an oar lock. Yeah.
Okay, we have another question about periodization.
Hmm.
How do you periodize your intensity sessions throughout the year prior to your A race?
So I've been a bit cruel on that historically, and I've just said we are prioritize we're periodization over decades rather than years. You know, I've got the idea of milestones rather than the rest of it. So it's proven to be pretty effective. I think most people over taper and stay too focused on that. We've got that cool calculator that tells you when you're tapering just right. I've changed it. There's two paths people take. People either over taper or then they try to cram at the last minute before a regatta, and all of a sudden the 2 rows a week goes to 5 rows a week, and then they're wondering why they don't race so well. It's because they're just suddenly now they're just overtrained. So yeah, we certainly see two journeys in terms of how people arrive at their events. I like the idea that on any given week you're ready to go on Saturday, and I think the periodization is probably less critical for masters athletes. You know, you just got to keep on with the intensity stuff or you lose it, right? So then you've got to do intensity year round. So I've definitely gone away from it. I think because my team get grumpy at that, or they got grumpy at that in the past, you know, we have targeted different events. And then where we get to is like a common session for us is like 4 by 4 minutes at 88% of our LT2 marker, right? So basically what I tell people is just do three, right? Just do three, you know, and then have the idea that like it's at 88% of, maybe it's 88% of your 2K, you know, as a number you might be able to relate to. So 300 watts is a 7-minute erg, you know, 270 watts, you know, 4 minutes on, 4 minutes off, just do three, and then you should be fine. You know, if the loads are lighter, I think that's less. So have the idea of doing less sets or less reps, but the same intensity and the same work. I guess the other key change that we do for the periodization is that we started to add in a few more to fatigue pieces. You know, I think, you know, to try to put some of the mental toughness sort of elements in there, you know, rather than, you know, too easy. So I'm not sure of the benefit of that. I'll be honest. I think that we've seen improvements in base fitness, so people haven't have to go as hard and being able to do PRs. But yeah, I think the mental toughness things are something that we've added in a little bit, and then starting to get the idea of getting really good at your race pace. So we know when people they've got 5Ks or 6Ks coming up, and their goal is to do 270 watts or whatever it is for the 6K, then we start to throw stuff in there so that they get comfy at race pace. Again, that's a thing stolen from cycling, where they really use that a lot of in terms of, you know, really trying to zone in on the magic marker and the way it feels and the way you recover, and then doing repeats of it. Talking about that durability. The way that most sports scientists talk about durability is it's their ability to do repeat pieces later on in workouts. And again, your fitness declines, right? So if I ask you to do I don't know, 4 minutes at 270 watts now, you'd be fine. If I ask you to do it after a 1.5 hour row, then, you know, I've now moved your endurance and your anaerobic capacities. So now I'm not sure if it's 88% of your marker because of the underlying fatigue and where you've taken your body. So yeah, I think durability is the idea that you can constantly go back and find that 280 watts, and you can do it multiple times over multiple sessions. Cycling is the one where it makes the most sense to describe it. If you're out there doing a Tour de France ride, and every time you come to a hill, you've got to be able in a position to sprint or you get dropped. So, you know, durability is the ability, all the sprinters, you know, when they sprint through the flag. So durability is the ability to be able to go and find certain speeds again and again and again. Yeah. And
I
if I don't answer these questions, yeah, just put another one in the chat there. I think we've got a good 10 minutes here. So yeah.
Yeah, I've got some questions that we can fill the time with if nobody else has some. I'm curious about the balance between endurance sessions and intensity, based on different ages as you age. So from your 30s through your 70s and beyond.
Yep.
You've talked a lot about intensity and keeping those high intensity sessions. How does endurance workouts play into that? Because there's a lot about zone two, you know, obviously in the literature. I'm a cyclist, that's my background. So that's everything now.
Yeah, I think I mean the reason I'm so focused on it is that the decline in your capacities is low, and if you've got an endurance background, you can get fit again quite quickly. So it feels easier. I think the challenges, and if you want to go fast, I think let's come back to the point of the soul seminar. If you want to go fast, you've really got to be on top of the intensity stuff, and you've got to maintain that capacity as much as you can. If I found someone who hadn't done endurance work for 20 or 30 years, 2 or 3 years, they'd be quite fast. So I think they definitely get the mindset towards the intensity sessions as the weak point of most of the training plans. I think, but endurance is critical. I think when you're doing a 1K rowing race, the idea is that it's more like 50-50. 50% of your speed's coming from anaerobic and 50% is coming from the endurance stuff. So you still want to do it. I think there is endurance benefits from doing the intensity sessions, which I think is when we did some of the lab cats. I mean, I was literally doing 3 half-hour ergs a week, and I was making massive improvements on my 1K. More than what I expected because I literally cut endurance. So I think there are some cardiovascular benefits from those high intensity sessions, which are of use. I supplement with really low intensity, and I just make sure that there's no chance I can get injured. I mean, I just bike to work and I bike my kids to school and back, and I try to get 100 kilometers on the bike a week, and I'm getting fitter. I occasionally go for a bike ride with a local bike team, and they rush up and down some hills, and so I join in there, and so I do a little bit of intensity stuff and try to hang on to the back. But I guess I use the load management tool to make sure that I'm not overdoing the endurance. It's not really the focus. I don't need to win an endurance session. I just need to see if I can get through the right amount of volume. And if I can get through 100 Ks a week on the bike, then I'm pretty happy that I'm doing okay. And that's, I mean, honestly, if you think about it, it's only 3 hours or 4 hours on a bike, and just do half an hour here and there. Through COVID, I just put the erg down in the garage, and I just, every time I walk past, I just jump on and do a kilometer. I mean, like, have the idea that you can find the spaces to do it. I'm lucky where I coach kids sports, so I go and run around the field with the kids, do the warm up, do the soccer, join them with the rugby drills and all the rest of it. So there's opportunities out there to do it, but I guess I make them more fun and more enjoyable, and then they're more likely to turn up. And just really the critical thing for me is that they can't get in the way of me being able to do my intensity sessions. So they've got to be more recovery oriented, and in that sense. And they're the ones that I cut the quickest. If I'm feeling sore and tired, say I'm sore and tired today from my 1 minutes yesterday, then I just want to go for a bike ride today. They're the optional ones, because I know that I can get that fitness back quickly. If I skip intensity sessions for a month, that's really hard for me to get back. But I can skip endurance sessions for a month, and I can get it back. But I've got a long history of doing endurance training. If you're a late to life masters athlete that's getting involved and doing these things, I think that would be different. I think have the idea that you want to build it up, but get off the bus a couple of stops early. Use the bicycle instead of the car to do the things to go to the boathouse. Go and help out the learn to row. Float around with them and jump in the bow pair and take those opportunities just to stay active and to keep moving. I think that's really the key. And I think endurance is easier to come by. I mean, literally, as masters, take your grandkids for a walk. Take kids for a walk. Take them for a run. Take them for a hike. The other big one I like after cycling is bushwalks and hikes. I think. I get to changing a little bit. What I think about with my endurance is I try to explore the world. So I try to not. I don't really like doing the indoor trainers on the Zwift and that kind of stuff. We've got one in the garage. I use it once a week, just as a warm up, really. But I'd much rather go for a run around the block, or take the dog for a walk and use that as my warm up, or go for a new hike, or walk on the beach, or go off into the hills and do some stuff. So. That makes it easy to do endurance training if I think of it as being exploring. So that I'm not sure if that helps, but that's my take on it.
Yeah, I appreciate that. One more question. This is one that probably is best for newer people to rowing. Coming from cycling, where we have gears and we're shifting all the time based on terrain or what the workout is. On an erg, you've got the resistance, that you can alter. but very few rowers, in my experience, change the resistance setting. They have their standard, whatever that might be, around a 3 or so on the 1 to 10 on a concept 2, but you can customize it to the actual like 120 or 125 or whatever you like. Is there anything related to the resistance training on ergs that you would say is important to take into consideration
Yeah,
for training?
I guess I haven't looked into this too much in terms of like research. So I can tell you my anecdotal stuff. I mean, where I get to is when I'm injured and I'm trying to just get around it and get in there. I've got I like 115. Like I just turn the drag factor to 115, and I try to have my feet really high, so that I'm thinking about flexibility and maintaining some range of movement. So I have the feet on the erg at hole number 2. So you can tell if I'm injured or I'm struggling with some aches and pains, because I'll turn the drag factor 110 to 115, and I'll drop the feet to like maybe 4 or 5 to try to take some of the load off the back and the hips, which is where I generally get a little bit sore. And then if I'm feeling good and I'm in a good place, then yeah, definitely I'll play around with the drag factor. If I feel like the workouts are getting a little bit stale, talking about that 4x4 minutes, if I'm feeling that's getting a little bit stale, then I'll see if I can do it at a different rate and at a different drag factor and with different shoe heights. So I guess the other one that I change probably more frequently than drag factor is where my feet are, and looking for different impacts of that. And yeah, but definitely different drag factors, and lean into the idea that when we're doing multiple reps and sets, you can change it as you go to sort of see what impact you get in terms of if you're for your intensity stuff, if it's high intensity, try to find a really nice setup for being really efficient and making it so that you can do more of the sets and reps. Again, so helping the recovery a little bit. But yeah, it really depends on what my thoughts are in terms of being able to get to the next training session. In terms of that, if I'm feeling cautious, then it's the old friendly. And then if I'm feeling like I can put a bit of grit in the diet and add some more some more training loads, different training loads, then yeah, definitely I think mix it up. And I clean my erg regularly. I want to see if I can get it to 200 drag factor. That's sort of the margin of where my erg is dirty or clean. So occasionally I just do some sessions just to make sure that the erg is clean. Otherwise, I pull it apart and give it a clean. I think that's a nice way of checking when it's the fan is full of gunk. Yeah.
Okay. I think we're out of time, but this has been great.
There we go.
Really appreciate
Yeah.
the talk, and I'd like to thank everybody who was here and asked questions. And once again, want to thank our sponsors, Coffee Corporation, Felipe Boats, and of course, Crew Lab. So we've got a 30-minute break now. If you're on the East Coast, it's sort of a late lunch. If you're on the West Coast, it's maybe brunch. And the next session start at 2 p.m. Eastern, and I hope to see some of you there. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, thank you, everyone.